Lazy Senate.
Lazy laws.
Lazy Senate.
Hazy laws.
Lazy Senate.
Hazy laws.
That's hazy laws if you didn't hear it up there in the Senate. Because when you guys don't change the laws, it's a very hazy situation for your average American going state to state with a bag of weed in your pocket. I mean, it's absolutely crazy that crossing the border between D.C. and Maryland or D.C. and Virginia can still be tricky if you have too much cannabis on you. The latest FBI data came out today. And there's a normal press release today that states that more than 360,000 people were arrested for marijuana in 2020. And this federal government is sitting on their hands, blaming the other party for inaction, when not a single vote has taken place in this Senate. So we're here today to be heard by the senators and their staff of both parties and the independents as well. Get to work, or we will vote and weed you out. Get to work, or we will vote and weed you out. And what we mean by that, weeding you out, is that we need to know who's with the people and who wants to keep putting the people in jail for a plant that has been inherited for generations among humans of all continents. We want you to vote, and we will weed out those who don't vote for us, who don't vote for the people, who don't vote to stop putting hundreds of thousands of Americans behind bars annually.
It's been eye-opening being out here with you all today. The sheer disregard, the sheer uneasiness, and the laughs and the smiles at even the word marijuana. It's not a joke. The people out here, the healing that it does, it is not a joke. And we have to stop treating it like a joke. It's so much more serious. It has helped us in all of our lives more than we can even begin to speak on.
I'll break out the Bible. Genesis 1:29. God grant us all plants bearing seed and all trees bearing fruit for food. So get the hell off our plant and let us have it, because we can grow it. It's ours. You want to grow it, your corporate buddies, corporate whatever. You want to grow it, fine. We may buy it if we like and don't want to grow it. Or we may do this or that. But it's our right before your damn right. You got that right? For life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we will be after you. We will run you out. Actually, you're already on the run, because so many of you are converting. You guys are getting out and getting into sponsoring, putting your money in it and making money. And damn it, before you corporate whores or whoever start selling this shit, you need to let the people out. We need cannabis clemency. People who stood up and grew it for the people who need it medically. It saves so many lives and help people. So you need to get with the program and convert now, or we're coming after your ass if you don't get out, because we're going to vote you out. And in addition to Genesis 29, I got a new one to throw at you from the Bible. Genesis 9:3. Not only did God give us the green plant, but he gave us all living animals that move and breathe here for food. So back off or get the hell out, because we're going to vote you out. And you better vote this Wednesday for the MORE Act, because we the people want more. And we're not going to be happy until we get more. Marijuana, opportunity, reinvestment, expungement. Clean people's records. Give people their lives back.
I'm going to name the U.S. senators on the Appropriations Committee or in leadership that are going to be responsible for lifting the rider to make sure that D.C. can actually regulate cannabis. And I'm going to want you to follow up with the name and say, lift the rider. Lift the rider. Lift the rider. Lift the rider. Senator Leahy. Lift the rider. Senator Leahy. Senator Shelby. Senator Murray. Senator Durbin. Senator Coons. Senator Manchin. Senator Murkowski. Senator Schumer. Senator Moran. Senator Boozman. Senator Kennedy. Senator Van Hollen. Senator Hyde-Smith. Senator Leahy. Senator Shelby. Senator Murray. Senator Durbin. Senator Coons. Senator Manchin. Senator Murkowski. Senator Schumer. Senator Moran. Senator Boozman. Senator Kennedy. Senator Van Hollen. Senator Hyde-Smith. All of these senators don't feel responsible to DC residents because they don't represent us. They represent all these different states, some of these states that have legalized. But here they're blocking DC's ability to regulate and have conversations about equity and figure out what it actually looks like to have cannabis justice locally.
Save medical marijuana. Save it. Preserve it. Preserve everything that we've learned and everything that we've done in these states to deliver high quality cannabis products from a variety of plant source materials in a vast variety of different modes of administration. And we need to preserve all that. None of it's FDA approved. None of it's legal under federal law. And the vast majority of it is pretty good under state programs that are well regulated. And these programs must survive. And the federal government must accommodate them as we move forward, even as, the part I love about the Dormant Commerce Clause, even as I, as a veteran, will travel from state to state with my cannabis with impunity, because it will be legal in the United States, and there will be a state in the Union that can oppose that. And that's another thing we need to preserve. Those are two different sides of the same coin. We may be fighting against ourselves on that one. It's not easy stuff. It's complicated. Need your help. What time is it?
4:26.
Happy 420, everybody.
We made a strategic decision not to smoke. We actually made a strategic decision to get a permit, to answer every question, to actually try to accommodate every request. Because frankly, these police who are in our community, I'm part of this community, have been freaking traumatized this year. Traumatized. And our whole culture of protest has been thrown up in the air. Well, and I just wanted, we wanted to come back and just have a regular protest that's peaceful. People feel comfortable, families can be here, where staffers feel like they can walk up and listen, where someone who's casually walking by can hear. But we don't want to it's funny, I wish there were 300, for the 360,000 people that were arrested last year, I wish there were like mobs ready to go crazy, because I think we would get the change really fast. But instead, the mobs went crazy for a liar, a total liar. And and we're like really sincerely here. So anyway, I just what's been the politics of this country, the violent politics of this country is not to be found among the stoners. I'm sorry. And I know some violent protesters do smoke weed. You should smoke more. Okay, you're not smoking enough. All right. But one time I was someone who considered violent protests legitimate when I was younger. I was accused by this old hippie, "You're a street fighting man." And I was like, because I was masked up and had a gas mask and was in the Black Bloc back in 2000, World Make IMF protests. And I saw these recent protests, I'm like, these protests are way more violent than what we were doing in 99 and 2000. Like on both sides, police and protesters. It's amped up. I mean, the graffiti, the property destruction during the last summer's Black Lives Matter protests was unprecedented in DC history, except for maybe the '68 riots, which really destroyed much of the city. But as far as vandalism, it was like off the charts. And I'm coming to the conclusion. I'm 48 years old last week. Violence isn't the answer. Violence scares most of the public. Violence is not uplifting and hopeful. And we live in a dangerous, dark world, and there's enough of that. Our politics should be hopeful and spiritual, and our leaders should work to strive to be examples. And we don't have examples right now, and I do blame both parties, but especially the Republicans.
I sort of have seen you do civil disobedience. To be clear, not violence, but like smoking. It's illegal, right? Like
that's pure civil disobedience, non-violent civil disobedience, smoking.
Yeah.
I mean, well, maybe if I smoked in the building, I wouldn't consider it entirely peaceful, because you literally are putting smoke in the air that other people are going to inhale, so you've affected them. I'm into consent. I want a consensual society. I want a society where people have a lot of personal responsibility too, and I don't want a nanny state. The drug war is part of the nanny state. It's like the worst of the nanny state. And so libertarians and like people who hate the U.S. government for one reason or the other, I know watch your stuff. And I'm also Jewish, and I'm really sensitive to like anti-Semitic stuff. I don't want anyone calling anyone a Nazi at this rally. We had a whole talk ahead of him, no Nazi comparisons. These are rules that basically all movements should adapt. You should never talk about killing anybody. You should never talk about Nazi. That person's like a Nazi. You should also probably not bring up COVID. Because like in our own group, there's a disagreement about vaccines. But we agreed to like respect, mutual respect. And I'm pro-vaccine. And we gave away joints.
Yeah, I saw that you gave away joints to people joints for jabs.
We gave away 10,000 joints in New York and DC. And it was a community effort. About 30 people donated cannabis. Like, it was an amazing effort. And, we could do cool stuff. Politics can be awesome and amazing and transformative, but the violence has got to stop. And these guys are so freaked out. So they're bringing it back to Capitol Police. Because I've watched your stuff a lot. I didn't realize who you were until just now. And that just shows like how clueless I am. But you have been out there at some protests that I'm like, what is going on? Like, who are all these armed people? Like, on all sides, like right wing, left wing, armed people. And I'm like, wow, I'm a little out of touch, perhaps, like with the street protest scene in the last few years or whatever it's turned into now. And it has been really quiet around DC since January 6th. We've had very few. We had Sharpton mobilize a significant number of people back in August to Lincoln Memorial. Everyone else is struggling to get turnout. There's sort of a mood of like, I don't want to go to Capitol Hill. That place would give me flashbacks. And
right. Even though your movement obviously is like not even remotely similar to the people who stormed the Capitol, like it sounds like it's changed organizing in DC for you. Do you want to talk more about that?
Well, COVID has changed organizing because we all agreed not to organize. We had a thing on the mall called Catharsis on the Mall back in November for a week. It was like a vigil against the drug war, and it was also like part of healing with psychedelics, and it was during the election. We just passed a ballot initiative 81, that decriminalized psychedelics here in DC. So that was like where our mindset was being out in the streets, but it was controversial. Like so many people in our own group were like, you guys are killing people by being out there in groups. And it's like, we weren't vaccinated yet, and it was a little risky, but we also felt like I went out for Black Lives Matter protests because I felt it was important, and I went out at the Republican National Convention protests, and I thought it was important, and I went out for the election week because I thought it was important. The rest of the time I was hiding in my house like everyone else, okay? I was barely hanging out with anybody. But sometimes you just sort of make, all right, this is life, I'm taking this chance. We're living with it's an endemic at this point. It's going to be an endemic if people don't get real and get vaccinated. I want to ask you if you're vaccinated, but I'm not. I'm not going to ask because it's none of my business.
I am.
You are vaccinated. Well, good. Because I think people who are vaccinated are trying to help the situation, not hurt the situation. There's so many people willing just to hurt the situation and make it worse. Almost like they want everything to fail. And I like to live in a society where you can go to a concert without wearing a mask. I went to a concert with 3,000 people the other night. Wearing a mask for hours and hours in a big crowded space is not fun. Like, let's come on, people. Like, can we please just get vaccinated? Like 90%.
Is that a controversial position though within the marijuana community?
Absolutely. So many of the marijuana consumers around the United States and activists who are, like in California, for instance, have been anti-vax. And they organized a pretty serious anti-vax protest at a vaccination center in at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, it was a few months in. I'm sorry, beginning of the vaccination period. It was like right when it started, and they had to shut the vaccination site down, and all these people were turned away. And then these people also had marijuana signs, and I was like, this makes us look horrible. And I felt like we had to do something and squarely put cannabis activism with the vaccine, that we believe in science, that science stood with legalization of cannabis years ago, when we first had the reports that it was actually medicine and that there was efficacy, and Institute of Medicine was standing with cannabis. So it's like, hey, science has been standing with us. We need to stand with damn science at this point. And forget the pharmaceutical companies. Like, there's a difference between the science and pharmaceutical companies. The science is, we should support science. Don't confuse the two. Like, greedy capitalist pigs who own science and patent it, okay, versus, you know, good science for the world, for humanity. If it wasn't for science, we'd all die. Our water supply would not be safe if we didn't know science. Come on, people. Trust math and science. Trust the engineers. They're not out to kill you. They're out to keep you alive. So the engineers, the GMO, I'm against GMOs. I walked from New York City to the White House in 2011 with like 100 people, 300 miles, demanding GMO labeling of foods.
Was that one of the March Against Monsanto's?
Yes, it was the first March Against Monsanto. It was it was actually also when Occupy was happening. We call ourselves Occupy Monsanto. So, and we showed up, and we were occupying for a long time. But getting back to that period, getting back to today, the GMO mRNA technology that's necessary to make vaccines that are 90+% effective initially, they eventually lose effectiveness, which is unacceptable. Those vaccines are here because of GMOs. And so I'm like with David Bronner from Dr. Bronner's, I'm with him when he says there are GMOs we should still be fighting, and those are the ones that increase chemical application in the field, which ends up in our food, and the plant can withstand all these chemicals, Roundup Ready crops. That was the only marketable trait of the GMO crops, was so they could spray more chemicals on them. But I don't want to eat chemical-laden food. We know it causes cancer. You know, we have the glyphosate lawsuits now. We know, we've been proven right. But the situation with this mRNA technology that's been peer-reviewed, has gone through, I know emergency trials now has gone through the full drug trial. It's fully approved, but at the time it wasn't, and there was an argument there to be made that was somewhat legitimate, that it hadn't been fully approved and you're a guinea pig. And yeah, okay, but can you read a spreadsheet? Because basically this spreadsheet tells me that this stuff's working. It's actually working remarkably well, and we should be enthusiastically taking it. The risks seem extremely low at this time, and if there are risks long term, okay, then we'll learn something. But that'll be factored into the next big decision. But right now, you should take it, and because there's an overwhelming evidence that it's safe and effective. And there's a brother named Phone Homie. I don't know, he might be watching even. He's on Instagram. He has a huge following. He's a dabber. He makes concentrates. He's in this community. He's supported our protests. He donates to our causes, and he actually donated cannabis to Joints for Jabs. But he never got vaccinated. He wanted other people to get vaccinated, but it wasn't for him. And he's a former Marine. He just spent like the last 3 months in a coma, and he's costing the taxpayers millions of dollars in healthcare coverage. No, I want my brother to recover, and he is. He's walking again. He can barely talk. It's like he's been on a respirator for so long. He weighs like not less than 90 pounds. Like it's like he's barely alive, but he's making a comeback, and everyone's rooting for him, and I'm rooting for him too. But I'm like, oh, why couldn't you just gotten vaccinated? You know, and whatever, you are living proof. Like, because even if he survives this, it's been a horrible experience. And there's so many people getting affected. We have 690,000 flags down the street right now. A flag for every person. It's an unbelievable sight. I really encourage people to go and look at that. And like, that's real. Like, this is really happening. It's hard to see it because it's still a small fraction of the overall population, but it's happening now. It's in the, you know, every 100 people you hear horrible stories. And can we just take the fucking vaccine? All right, and so I want Joints for Jabs to like be the counterbalance to people who are not listening to science, they're listening to ideology. And I'd rather listen to have science-based decisions, fact-based decisions, data-based decisions, and that goes for these guys here in the Senate on everything, including whether someone's guilty of sedition or not. Let's just listen to the facts and let the chips fall where they may.
How do you see kind of the utility of like trying to intersect with other issues, like as the drug war movement, like touching on GMOs, vaccine, like other issues that people might care about?
I'm definitely.
Does it run the coalition or does it?
Well, first of all, repositioning cannabis as pro-vaccine was very strategic. Okay, I don't want to be lumped in with Marjorie Taylor Greene and anti-vax movement for people. That's crazy. I wanted to be lumped in with the vast majority of Americans that are on board for vaccinations. And some were a little on board and some were a lot on board. Some need to see other people on board before they were on board. They would be the last people to take the vaccine. I understand. Everyone has their threshold of when they make that decision. Some people are going to make it more easily than others. And others, some people can't take it. I respect that. There's a reason why you can't take it if you have autoimmune diseases and things like that. So we have to protect those people. That's why other people should take it. I know the vaccine's not perfect either. I know there's breakthrough infections, but that's a tiny fraction of the infections. And that still proves our point. Like you can tell me all you want there are breakthrough infections. There's just so many outrageous comments that we got when we did Joints for Jabs. We got trolled really hard by the anti-vax. And I know what I do with those people. I'm like, I'm blocking you. Like, I don't have to listen to you.
Do you know how many people got jabs corresponding to your Joints for Jabs?
How many we got?
How many people did you get vaccinated?
Oh.
Or give people?
Every single person who got a joint had to have been vaccinated. We checked their cards. That was the way you got a joint. It was like Krispy Kreme. By the way, we announced on January 12th that we were going to give away thousands of joints later in the year when the vaccine was widely available. A week later, Krispy Kreme announced free donuts for a year if you show up. I know, and I was like, they totally saw us acting and getting a ton of press. Because we did. When we announced it, we got press all over the world. All over the world. It was a global story. It was the biggest story of the year for this organization. It was that we're going to give away weed outside vaccination centers. And we did it at 38 vaccination centers in DC on one day. And we did it in Union Square in New York. And it was just in one, and I told them, I was like thinking COVID, I was like, decentralized, no large crowds, don't even tell people where we're going to be, just tell them, go get vaccinated on 420 and you'll probably get a joint, because we're literally covering most of the vaccination sites. So, New York City, they were like, yeah, we're doing it in Union Square. I was like, you guys are going to have a huge crowd, and they did. They had this like 2,000 person line, and I was like, like guys, like we were really trying here, but you know what? The publicity was high, and the vibes were high, and like the story kept getting covered, and the photos kept getting used, and it was like, wow, that was the best idea we've had in a couple years.
Maybe a good way to wrap it would be like, what do you see as sort of the future of direction of this? Like, especially if they don't end up descheduling marijuana. Where do you see it going?
If they don't deschedule, if they don't pass the MORE Act, I'm hopeful we'll actually get a vote before the midterm election that really makes it clear who stands where. I mean, we're pretty much at that end game at this point where like no one's going to budge, so let's vote, let's know who's where, and we can start organizing. I mean, it would advantage the legalization side to have the vote sooner than later. So that's what we're kind of telling Chuck Schumer today. So I actually think we might actually get that if they listen, because we're not mean people. We're like, we want to support certain people in there. We do support. I give money to people in there. I'm not an anarchist. I was at one time. I'm not anymore. I may be dressed in black, but I am not an anarchist. And I love anarchists to death. And I think it's a wonderful spirit to be an anarchist. And I think anarchists do contribute a lot to our democracy without even voting. But I do think people should vote. I think we should. I'm not for tearing down the U.S. government. I don't want to live through a bloody revolution. I'm sorry, it would be bloody. We can't do it, guys. And then we'd still have to rebuild this shit. You know. So, I mean, why do we want to tear it all down? And it's come on, let's get more positive. Everyone needs to take mushrooms and get more positive.
Fair enough. That might be a good note to end on.